Good morning, teachers. I just wanted to go over a few things. Sarah did a great job on the videos. Those were from 4 years ago, and since then we've made a few changes. Her video showed the fish actually being put on the sheet of construction paper or fadeless. Some people got fadeless paper. My written lesson plans are this: the fish that was mounted on copy paper. That kind of forces the fish to be a little bit smaller. I love, this got cut off, but I love it when the fish can overlap. I just think that's a kind of an interesting design visual. So I'm going to leave that up to you. Depending on how you want to do it is fine. But I was going to come back to this. If you're working on a large piece of paper, a couple of things to keep in mind. So the kids have cut their head and their tail, and they can do their own tail designs, their own head designs. That's fine. We included the templates just to force the size because kids often will do things itty bitty tiny, and so we need this to fill our page. So if you are working with the copy paper design, what they'll do is maybe have their head and tail hang off, and we'll mount it to color paper later. So they're going to kind of decide where their image is going to go, and then they will draw their lines in just as Sarah had showed you. Okay, so there's going to be that. The few things that I wanted to mention is I know Sarah mentioned pre-cutting eyes, which is a great idea because I'm going to tell you, you're going to get hit with all the kids at the same time wanting you to cut their eyeballs out for them. A circle, especially one smaller than this, is really difficult for littles to do. So you might want to just take a baggie and pre-cut these. The other thing is you can cut your time immensely by cutting, and actually this is what I do, is I double, triple, or either quadruple my paper size, and I cut out eyes. And you know what? Something's just now occurring to me as I'm doing this. This is something to show the kids when you are talking about cutting, is show them how you turn your paper as you close your scissors. Remember, a lot of kids do not have art in schools, so you schools that have regular full-time art teachers, y'all are blessed, but a lot of schools don't have that. So cutting skills are something that the kids really need. So look what I'm doing though, I'm turning my paper as I'm cutting. So go over that with the children. That will be, you might even want to practice on some scrap paper if you think you have time. So you've got your eyeballs cut out, and then I just draw my pupils on with a Sharpie, and that makes it easy to have that white highlight instead of trying to cut out a little bitty tiny white highlight. Is really a pain, very difficult. And you can do different sizes, and that way the kids, when they're ready to glue their eyes on, they can do this and they can turn the pupil any way they like. I want to show you the difference though, because this is what kids are going to want to do. Look at the difference here versus that. And that's what kids will often do if left to their own devices, is they'll just cut out from colored paper. That looks like a dead fish. And so putting the white highlight gives life and sparkle to the fish, so hugely important. Also, I want to, something else just occurred to me. This is one of those lessons, and I mentioned this in the teacher meeting, that could be a 2 versus 3 part lesson. The beautiful thing about collage is the more pattern, detail, extras that you add, the more beautiful they are. So you can kind of gauge if you want to spill over into a third lesson, even if it's maybe the first 15 minutes of that third class, just to add some details, that is fine. So you can think about that. Another tip that I wanted to share is cutting scales quickly. So you can do a couple of things. You can cut a strip, and you just go through this with your children. They can pre-draw if they feel like they need to, and they might. At least getting started, draw some scales, and you can just tell them it's like waves on an ocean or a letter U. And then what they're going to do is, so I've folded this paper. This will give you double scales, and I just go through and I cut. Oh, you know what? I did it don't do it the way I did it. Do it the way I say, which is it's going to go this way. And that happens where I've drawn it on the fold. If I was to open these out, then I'm going to have to slit it that way. Okay, so let me start again. So again, notice how I'm turning my paper, not my scissors, and so that'll give you 2 scales as opposed to 1. And these are pretty fast to cut out. So if you have time and you want to sit in front of a movie at your home before your class and cut a bunch of scales, I do that also. I usually have a baggie with some extra scales for those littles that are having a hard time. And if you have like little kinders and their scales are ginormous, that is okay. That's going to help the process go fast enough for them to be able to complete the project. What I find happens frequently, as Sarah pointed out, is you get these itty bitty tiny scales, which could be beautiful, but it's going to take forever and they'll never finish their project. So then what I do in a class is I stand in front of the group and I instruct the kids when we're getting ready to start on scales, is I'll tell everybody, I'll just come up with a number. I want everybody to cut out 8 scales, for instance. And so they've got their scales sitting here on their place. They've got these glued down. They've got their ocean floor glued down, not necessarily the eye at this point. And I'll tell them, I want you to line up on the back of your fish. I'm sorry, mine are all the same color, so you can't probably see the difference. However many that it might be 4, it might be 2. In my instance, it's 3. And I have them just line it up right here on the tail. We all do this together, and so myself or my assistant will walk around before they've even glued anything down, and they glue that first row down. Then I have them do it again. I do a second row, and I'll tell everybody, and you're really hand-holding them through this process. It's kind of high control to start with, but that's going to keep you from having things go opposite, and by the time you discover it, you're having to pull them off, and if your glue is dried, that's a problem. So we're just hand-holding them through this process, getting these scales laid down, and then you say, okay, glue them down. And then at that point, once they have 2 or maybe even 3 rows done, then they're home free and they're good to go. Let's see, it seemed like there was one other thing I wanted to tell you. Sarah mentioned the little dust pan and broom. I got this at the Dollar Tree, and they have all different styles, and so it's $1. So when it's time to clean up, I'll tell you, you'll have a zillion of these little scraps all over your room, on the floor, on the table. And so you could put somebody in charge of the dustpan if you want, or if you don't have one of those, what I do is I tell everybody, I want everybody to pick up 10 pieces of paper off the floor, and I just put the trash cans in the middle so they can throw them in. And they see that as a game, especially the boys. They race to get those little pieces picked up. I encourage the kids to keep bigger scraps, not necessarily this size. And then these are left over from years past. And so when you're finished, I flatten things out really nicely. I throw away the little bitty pieces, but I keep this, and I know a lot of teachers have boxes or bags of scraps left over from their class. You can feel free to keep those if you think you're going to be with me, because we will do collage again. Actually, we're going to do it in the fall for sure. That's going to be our Christmas card project. So keep scraps for future classes, or if you're just filling in and you want to turn these in, do not throw these away. These are like golden. So hang on to your paper scraps. They will help you for future. So at the very end of your project, another little tip, remind kids to roll the glue stick down into the holder. Sometimes you have to push it with your fingers before you put the lid on, and make sure those lids get on good. And then they can sign their name with the Sharpie here. They can sign it in the white, that's fine. But you want to really monitor this, because the kids will get carried away with little cartoons and designs. They'll draw bubbles, which potentially could be okay, but it can turn into a giant mess really quick. So you remind them collage is cut paper. You're not going to put a lot of drawing with this lesson. So these are beautiful. It's a lot of time invested, and it can be a little bit tedious for the little ones, but they're absolutely beautiful when they're finished. So if you go in prepared and with a plan, it will minimize difficulty for you as a teacher and for the kids. And so I hope you have a lot of fun. Thanks.